Let's talk a bit more about impact. What can impact do to assist companies to improve their cash flows in the longer term?
Essentially, what impact can do is go into any operating organisation, preferably after they've reviewed their operating model and what they're going to do going forward. But it can be part of that process, and then align what the new requirements for the facilities, office space, other type of facilities are with that operating model. Now, given leasing structures are sometimes, well, in the UK or in America, can be 5 or 10 years, you can't necessarily break a lease and get out of it straight away. That can mean a lot of strategic planning and putting in place a long-term plan. In the Middle East, we have the luxury of a lot shorter term leases. So you may only have 6 months before you can exit or downsize the property or the facility that you're in. And we can do certain things to reduce that operational cost whilst you're idling that empty space. Or we can look at repurposing it. We can look at all the options there are to maximize the efficiency of the existing facilities until you can downsize. But I'll just raise a point on downsizing there, David, if I may. As you're aware, in the UAE in particular, we have a lot of free zones. And the deal with the free zone is, if you have 100 people working from your office and you want 100 visas, you will lease a certain amount of space. It's 1 visa per so many square feet, depending on the free zone. Now, if you're tied up in a 3 or 5 year lease with a free zone operator for 100 people, for example, and you've come back after COVID, and for whatever reason, whether it be redundancy, whether it be working from home, instead of having 50 people work in the office, 100 people work in the office, you're now going to need 50. Do you think the free zone is going to say, yes, that's fine, you can downsize your office and we'll lose that 50% of rental income and you can keep your 100 visas? It's not going to happen. So there is another sort of conundrum that is now hitting corporates and companies that are invested in the free zones that have lost headcount and need to minimize their space, or they would prefer people to work from home, but there is a catch-22. In the UAE, we're in a real estate-based economy, and the free zones were set up and funded in that fashion to protect the real estate economy of those free zones. So quite how that one's going to work out, I don't know. In the onshore department, in Dubai, for example, in the DED registered onshore corporations and companies, they have an office space and they are free to upsize and downsize. It doesn't really affect the amount of visas that they're allocated. However, I have a feeling there will be some moves afoot from the government to curtail an awful lot of downsizing in favour of working from home. The other thing that I would mention, having worked for a multinational company for the last 8.5 years, the question is now being raised, I'm sure, around the world, and particularly in areas like Singapore or in Dubai and Abu Dhabi and Doha. Why are we flying people in from countries to sit in expensive locations such as Dubai when we've now proven everybody can work from home? So we could actually have everybody sat at home in India. If they were Indian, if they were Pakistani, they can stay in Pakistan. We can pay them to track our working hours, but ultimately we would pay them what their day's work is worth in Pakistan or India or elsewhere, as opposed to shipping them to Dubai, housing them in Dubai, paying expensive allowances, rents, etc., and inflated salaries because they're in Dubai, when actually they can provide me the same level of service working remotely. And they've said themselves that they're all happy working from home, so why would that be an issue? So I think there's going to be a lot of serious thought driven by CFOs and chief operating officers as to how these new operating models look and what the office space looks like thereafter.
Yeah, I mean, there have been some industries that have been outsourcing to India, as you mentioned, in particular. One of those is the publishing industry. Typesetting, for example. You know, all of books, most of the books now are typeset in India. And that industry has downsized its people because it doesn't need them. It can just literally send us a manuscript to somewhere in Calcutta or wherever and get back a book typed and ready to go to print. So that's something that's happened quite a lot. And I think that that's going to happen to a lot of other industries, as you say, because there is no point. If they can't go to meetings, what's the point of them being there?